Look at that beautiful shot in our nation's capital, the Peace Tower, Parliament Hill. We are live tonight at the National Gallery of Canada, not far from Parliament Hill, in the hometown of Ontario's 24th Premier, Dalton McGuinty. And we want to say hello, everybody, and we welcome you to Day 2 of Agenda on the Road and the kickoff of the agenda's Your Vote 2011, as we put the issues leading up to the fall vote under the microscope tonight. Exactly 4 weeks from tonight, we are in Hamilton, the Hammer as they call it, the hometown of NDP leader Andrea Horwath. And then in April, we venture to Niagara, the home turf of Ontario PC leader Tim Hudak. Now, here's a brief look at what happened at yesterday's Agenda Camp. Roll tape, please.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yesterday, nearly 100 interested and engaged citizens gathered at Ottawa City Hall with a special assignment to tell us what they believe the key election issues ought to be.
How do we support the shift of social services, of health services?
If you're going to download responsibilities, you got to download some resources as well.
They divided up into groups and began to refine their ideas. For example, some wanted to talk jobs in the economy, others healthcare, education, or energy.
My sex doesn't make me a minority.
52% of the population here.
Facilitator said, we're basically
Lee, you're interrupting him.
And 7 hours of occasionally intense debate later, we ended up with a handful of key questions that reflected the consensus of the group.
What happened today was we had a reversal of roles. Instead of the media talking to us, the other way around. We are talking, we are the ones setting, again, the agenda. We are the ones deciding what's going to be said and what we think is important.
And now, here to answer the questions that emerged from yesterday's Agenda Camp are Yasser Naqvi. He is the Liberal MPP from Ottawa Centre, which is just out that window behind him and over his shoulder. Lisa MacLeod, the PC MPP from Nepean Carleton. And for the NDP, this one was a little trickier. The fact is, the NDP have no seats in Eastern Ontario, no candidates nominated yet either. So we are pleased to welcome Jeff Atkinson, who's on the NDP's provincial executive and was his party's candidate in Ottawa Centre in the 2003 election. Welcome, everybody. It's good of you all to be here this evening. Pleasure. Want to mention as well that we did invite Premier McGuinty to be with us. After all, he represents Ottawa South. This is his home turf, but he declined to accept our invitation. So we go forward anyway with a couple of items of business as well. I want to remind everybody that we're live streaming tonight's broadcast online. So go to tvo.org/theagenda if you want to participate that way. Mike Miner, our fifth column blogger, is moderating the chat. There's Mike up at the back of the hall. He is moderating the chat on our Inside Agenda blog, so if you want to have your comments put up on the screen during the course of the broadcast, and here in the room, incidentally, as well, weigh in that way. Also, you can get to us via Twitter, twitter.com, #YourAgenda, and send your comments to us that way, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/theagenda. We are very interactive here this evening. Okay, at the end of yesterday's Agenda Camp, we asked all the participants to vote on all of the issues that came forward. And the one issue that got the most votes, and therefore the most support for us putting these questions to you, was about this. Roll tape, Michael.
Our question was about energy. If elected, what would your government do to assure safe, environmentally friendly, market competitive, affordable, and sustainable supply of energy based on scientific research and implemented in a transparent, competitive process? We had a number of people in our group that were very concerned about the long-term sustainability of certain aspects of the Green Energy Act.
Okay, Guy, thanks for that one. All right, energy, the first question. That was the biggest issue yesterday in our Agenda Camp deliberations. Yasser, why don't you kick it off? How, a lot of adjectives in that question, but pick up on it if you will. Government policy on energy. How you doing?
Well, it's a very broad question, and there were a lot of adjectives in that question. The challenge is to create a clean, stable, and modern electricity system in the province of Ontario, a system that would meet the needs of the 21st century economy and the quality of life we enjoy in this province. We've had a system up to now which was built in 1900s, and we need to modernize that system. The second issue around in modernizing the system in terms of investing in our infrastructure and the grid is to get away from use of dirty coal as well as a source of creating electricity, which is a cheap source, but has a far more higher long-term cost when it comes to the environment and our health. And that's what the provincial government has been doing, is to create a mix of energy generation, relying on nuclear, hydro, and now also focusing on renewable sources like wind and solar to get away from coal as a mix.
That's the philosophy underpinning the Liberal position. Lisa, what do the Tories have to say about this?
Well, thanks very much, Steve, and welcome to Ottawa. And I say that you are in the largest agricultural city in the world, and a lot of people don't know that about our great city. One of the biggest issues we hear on a day-to-day basis at our constituency offices or on talk radio here at CFRA is the price of hydro. It's a number one issue that we hear from our constituents. Look, the Ontario PC Party, under the leadership of Tim Hudak, wants to make our energy policy about economic policy, people's ability to pay and bringing choice into the system, whether you want to use the smart meters or not. It means, yes, there's going to be an element on the grid that is going to be wind and solar energy, but we also need to bring in nuclear power and invest in that. So by and large, I think that we've been hearing from the community, and we've been hearing right across Ontario, that there's an issue here, and consumers' ability to pay is the number one issue. So again, hydro rates, from time and time again, you hear that they're going up, but right now they're almost unaffordable for people, whether that's in this city, the city of Ottawa, and our rural communities around it, or right across the province.
Okay, we'll get into some discussion about this as we go along, but Jeff, I'll give you a chance first to put the NDP position on the record.
Great, thanks, Steve. And again, welcome to Ottawa. I'm not surprised at all that the issue of hydro was number one in the city of Ottawa. It's the same way across Ontario right now. I got my hydro bill yesterday. It's the biggest one I've ever had. My air conditioner isn't running right now. Most people are feeling the pinch of bloated electricity bills, and it's part of a bigger problem in Ontario that just zeroes down on the fact that people are hurting because of the economy. They don't have the ability to pay the high electricity bills that they're getting right now because of the need to pay for the government's investment in green energy. The position that the NDP takes on the issue is that while the government can talk all it wants about getting rid of dirty coal, can talk about green energy, the focus needs to be on providing affordable energy for people and looking at the long-term needs of Ontario as part of a comprehensive energy strategy. You start by listening to people, and you start by putting them first. The priority for this government hasn't been to put people first. It's about signing contracts quickly, and it's not really thinking through the long term.
Let's put this to Yasser, because obviously you've heard, we know that under the McGuinty government, the plan has been to make Ontario the cleanest energy jurisdiction anywhere in North America. But there has been a price and some controversy associated with that. Has it been worth it?
Well, I think we have to look at, from an economic point of view, what we're doing here. We're creating a new clean energy sector in this province. And by investing in renewable sources like wind and solar, we're really encouraging new investment, new jobs that are being created in the province. Again, I go back to the point about creating a province for the 21st century. We cannot rely on the models that were in the previous century.
But are we paying too much for that?
I think the cost initially is high. But it's important investment in our infrastructure. I mean, one of the biggest investments we have seen in our electricity infrastructure is updating the generation of electricity, is updating the transmission. There is going to be costs associated to creating a smart grid. Ontario government in the last 7 years has invested $15 billion to do so. And that's what we're seeing reflected in the cost. But we cannot continue how we did things in the past, and that is by just having cheap electricity available to us and disregard the use.
Okay, Lisa, we know your party has been critical of the clean energy approach that the Liberal government has taken. Having said that, contracts have been signed, and business likes predictability. So are you here tonight to tell us that you're going to cancel these contracts, or what?
Well, first of all, we'd like to see what's in that $7 billion Samsung agreement. Let's put this into perspective. We are in the nation's capital. It's larger than the F-35 contract that the federal government started putting through in the previous Liberal administration right through till now. That's how big this contract is with Samsung. And guess what? We don't know what the deals are. My colleagues in the Democratic Party have put in an access request. Everything was redacted. Our own party, Tim Hudak, our leader, has been calling for the Auditor General to look at that deal to make sure it is a value for money. What we're hearing right now is no, it's not a value for money. I only have to look out the back window of my constituency office to see the people that are paying for these massive subsidies from multinational corporations like Samsung. It is the people of this province, the people of this city, who are actually paying for hydro with these high hydro rates.
Would you cancel the contract?
The reality is it's very difficult to cancel contracts, but I can tell you this, Tim Hudak has been very clear. No more handsome subsidized sweetheart deals come October 7th when he's Premier.
Do you want to talk just a little bit about why? I mean, we heard that yesterday a lot. People wanted to know why the details of the Samsung contract had not been able to be made public. What is the explanation for that?
Well, it's a commercial agreement that is signed by a company. But I think there's a misconception out there, which I want to take this opportunity to correct. It's not the government of Ontario is giving $7 billion to Samsung. It's the other way around. Samsung is investing $7 billion in our province. These are foreign investors' dollars being invested in renewable sources of energy. That's a huge economic boom. That is going to create about 16,000 jobs in the province of Ontario. And we feel that when it comes to creating a new economy, that is the right type of investment, and is also going to result in a clean source of electricity and a better environment as well.
Jeff, Samsung has agreed to build numerous facilities here. They are building plants. They are hiring people.
They are. And the thing is, Samsung got that contract. It's a contract that the government has signed. It's a contract between a government and a corporation. It's not just a contract between corporations. The people of Ontario have a right to know the details of that contract. You represent them. They're the shareholders in this deal. But yes, Samsung's going to be providing jobs, but Samsung's also going to be making an awful lot of money off this contract as well. And we've decided to go the route of signing contracts with multinational corporations like Samsung. Meanwhile, we're shutting out organizations like Ontario Power Generating Authority, the energy company that we own as citizens of Ontario. You've shut us out of the process. It's all corporate. It's all business. You're signing contracts and helping a lot of people make a lot of money off of our shift to green energy, but maybe you've forgotten the number one priority.
Okay,
it's about the people of Ontario.
Let me give Yasser a chance to respond to that, and then we'll come in the audience for a second.
Well, I think it's important to remember that this is no different than building a nuclear plant. I mean, if we don't go having a renewable source in our mix, then what are the options? We build more nuclear plants. Does nuclear plants come cheaper? They're in fact even more expensive, more costly. In fact, we can see we're still paying the debt retirement charges because of the previous nuclear deals.
Well, you should put those debt retirement charges and what your plan is to pay them off on the bill, because that's what we've been calling for over a month and a half now. And we've asked the Auditor General to look into that as well. We've got some serious challenges on those bills. And I only have to say, as again, I said it before, look out the back window at my constituency office to see people who are having problems paying that hydro bill. There has to be some transparency brought back into this system. And if that doesn't happen, people are going to be not only very angry, they're also going to be very scared in how they're going to continue to pay
Lisa,
for these high bills.
Let me get your view on this, Lisa. You know, the government has offered $1 billion in refunds on this, right? You say people can't afford it. The government's borrowing $1 billion to give people energy
They're borrowing
rebates.
$1 billion of our money to basically do a shell game, and my colleague from the NDP will agree with me. Why bother putting the HST onto your heat and hydro bill if you're only then going to admit that you've made a mistake, backtrack, and then put this rebate in place?
But I think the challenge here is that we haven't heard any plan from Tim Hudak and his Conservative Party when it comes to energy policy, and the only thing I keep hearing is that we're going to cancel a bunch of contracts. So what are we going to go just does the nuclear deal and sign more nuclear contracts which are not cheap at all, or are we going to go back to burning coal to produce electricity? We're not clear on that. I think Ontarians deserve to know exactly what
that's not an option.
Let me get in here because I want to introduce you to the guy who started this whole thing. It was your discussion group yesterday that really hammered home the energy issue, and you got the most votes from the other people who attended.
Great day, Steve.
Okay, so tell me, what have you heard so far?
Well, we've heard the talking head position of the Liberal side of it. I think that when you look at some of the coal scrubbers that are now being introduced in Britain, and it's now 90% efficient for CO2 capture, I don't think the coal argument washes anymore. I think that spending $17 to $20 billion that is going to produce 1.2% of the baseload power in Ontario, i.e. wind and solar, is definitely a little far-fetched.
Okay.
And I think if we look at the European experience and what's happening in Spain right now, the wheels are falling off for the people that started green energy before us. So can we not look at the Green Energy Act and tweak it?
Tell me this guy. I can tell you're on TV because you know to keep going. I can tell. You're hard to knock off your game here. I know you don't like the Liberal plan too much, but have you heard anything from the other two parties that you think is competitive with that?
Well, I think that the platform so far as it's been introduced by Tim Hudak is the fact that energy policy is economic policy. My biggest problem is the fact, not only because of the transparency of the Samsung agreement, but the fact is if we have high hydro costs, How is that going to affect our ability as a province to compete industrially? And when hydro is one of the highest variable input costs of a business, and we've got our provincial brother across the border at 6 cents a kilowatt hour, why not take $17 billion and throw it at healthcare and buy power from Quebec?
Got to ask you, are you a member of a political party?
I'm a supporter of the PC Conservatives because I was fed up with the Liberals after 96.
Okay, the one thing we did here yesterday, again, thank you, Guy. Anyway, the one thing we did here yesterday, just echoing on what Guy had to say, was 6 cents a kilowatt hour across the border in Quebec, in some cases here 80 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on what kind of clean energy you're tapping into. Can we really be competitive at those rates going forward? Yes, sir.
Well, I've heard this argument before, and there's a couple of points to that. One is, do you want to rely on another province like Quebec for your electricity source? I mean, how from an energy security point of view, I don't feel very comfortable to rely on another province, Quebec, who's often threatening to separate from Canada as a source of electricity. And secondly, easier said than done, because electricity just doesn't, jumps from one corner to the other. You have to build then a transmission system, and longer the distance, more chances of that electricity getting lost in the exchange. So, I mean, we're talking about really complex nature, and it's not going to be any cheaper.
Do you accept that explanation, Jeff?
Absolutely not. It's energy policy is economic policy. It's about being competitive on the open market. Why would an energy company want to invest in generating energy in Ontario when they can't afford to sell it outside of the province if we ever have a surplus? And if Ontarians themselves can't actually afford to use it, it doesn't make any sense. And the priority of the Green Energy Act, as implemented by this government, seems to be about rushing into a bunch of deals with energy generator contractors. A lot of solar panels were sold in Ontario to farmers over the past couple of years that aren't going to get plugged into the grid now. Someone made a lot of money selling solar power panels to farmers. Unfortunately, those farmers have gotten, can I say screwed on TV Ontario?
I think you just did.
They got screwed.
I think you just did.
And that's the implementation of this act.
Let me give Lisa the last word on this. Lisa, the one thing that I have heard the government members say over and over again is, okay, Tim Hudak, Lisa MacLeod, you don't like our position, fine. Where's yours? We've heard that a lot.
Well, first of all, I think we've been very clear. It needs to be economic policy. We need to reintroduce choice into the system. We do have to make sure that as we move forward, there are no more sweetheart deals to multinational corporations. We have to look after ourselves here in Ontario. Jeff made a great point about the backtracking that's happened with the microfit program across Ontario. The system that the Liberals have right now is simply unworkable. It's unaffordable. And I think I've heard a new low here today that we can't enter into negotiations and agreements with Quebec because they might separate. Like, come on. You know what? Fear-mongering is enough. People in my community, the people of this city, know that hydro rates are too high. Hydro bills have skyrocketed.
Okay, but the only thing you've said so far, Lisa, is you'd offer choice. I mean, that may be the start of a plan, but is there a bigger plan than that?
There'll be a bigger plan. Of course, in the lead up to the next election, Tim Hudak will put out our platform in plenty of time. No surprises here. But at this point in time, I mean, he's put out the broad strokes of what our plan will look like. Okay. And I think it's unfair to characterize it any other way.
We've had lots of things. Let's wind it up on hydro because we got lots of other topics we want to get to as well. Issue 2. Yesterday, another one of the top vote getters for our discussion at our agenda camp at Ottawa City Hall, government transparency. Roll tape, please.
This is about what will the government do to ensure the availability of information to enable public participation in government decision making. And we think this is important because there's been so many recent examples of decision making that has been opaque and not transparent, and where there perhaps seems to have been a poor outcome because of that. And we look at energy policy, we look at privatization decisions, we look at perhaps immigration.
Okay, as we look at a beautiful shot through the National Gallery of Canada's windows here, we are in this gorgeous facility looking out over Parliament Hill as we continue our look at the major issues that came out of yesterday's agenda camp leading into our October 2011 election vote later this year. Okay, the question, what will you do to ensure the availability of information to enable public participation in government decision making? We heard this a lot yesterday. People want to feel like they are really consulted, listened to, and a part of the process. Those who want to be engaged want to feel like decisions are being made with their input, and they're not sure that that's the case. Yes, sir, is that the case in this government?
Well, I think a lot depends on the individual members as well, because in the way I look at it, my job, I am a representative for my constituents. And a part of my responsibility is to ensure that I'm engaged with them. I continue to go, for example, door to door to ensure that I'm asking my constituents, what can I do for you? What issues do you want me to work on? Or doing town hall meetings like the one you held yesterday. So there's various avenues. I think technology also is going to play a very important role now with as we are doing tonight, with Facebook and Twitter and other mediums. There is even more opportunity for us to engage and interact with Ontarians across the province. The Premier, for example, does a lot of tweeting and engages with people. That kind of opportunity did not exist before. So I think there's a combination of things, but I fundamentally believe that really boils down to individual members, and it is part of our job is to ensure that we constantly engage with our constituents and work on their issues.
Let's start with the official opposition. Not just, I know you're going to tell us that you don't think the government's being transparent enough, but how about the official opposition? How are you transparent and how are you accountable to your electors?
That's a great question, actually. I was going to talk about our plan. I view that question having two aspects to it. One is how do we get access to information from government? The second is how do we get access to decision-making in government? Now let me talk first about the decision-making. Right now our party, under the leadership of Tim Hudak, has decided to embark on one of the largest surveys of its kind in this province's history. It's a 50-question deep survey asking Ontario residents to participate in our decision-making processes. We lead into the 2011 budget as well as the 2011 election. That's on haveyoursayontario.ca. It's gone to every household in my riding, and my colleagues have followed suit by doing the same.
How many responses you had so far?
I've had probably well over 10,000 just in Nepean and Carleton alone. I know the party's website has been probably similar numbers, and my colleagues, as I mentioned, have gone out to the field as well with this. So that's an opportunity for anybody that's watching here tonight on the agenda to go onto that website, haveyoursayontario.ca, and help move their ideas forward through the official opposition and hopefully Ontario's next government. The second thing I recognized out of that question was access to information. That's why the Ontario PC Caucus, and I was the sponsor of the bill, put forward the Truth in Government Act. That bill that I introduced last May would have done a number of things. First of all, it would have opened up access to information, freedom of information right across every government board, agency, and commission, to which we have 622 agencies, boards, and commissions, as well as every ministry we've got. We've also would have made it important and the law to disclose all hospitality and travel expenses and any contract over $10,000. In addition to that, we would have also put forward reclassification of jobs. So it would have been
groundbreaking. What's the status of the bill, Lisa?
Well, the bill was defeated after the first reading. After the second reading in the House. The Liberals defeated it and then put forward a bill.
Okay, Jeff, let's get the NDP position on this, on being more transparent and accountable to your electors.
Well, in all fairness to Lisa, I think the people of Ontario are more interested in having their say with their elected officials than they are in being able to read about what they had for lunch at a meeting 3 months ago. It's just not the same thing. And the fact that this question came up yesterday, I learned about it today. I was busy on the weekend. And it surprised me that this issue would come up in Ottawa, that people feel completely left out of the decision. It's no surprise to me that people in Ottawa feel left out of the decision-making at Queen's Park. One of the biggest challenges for Ottawa is just simply, no offense to my colleagues here, having their voices heard at Queen's Park. It's a long-standing gripe that Ottawa has, a grievance that Ottawa has, is that Queen's Park just doesn't listen to us. Even though the Premier comes from this city, we just don't seem to be heard.
The Mayor was also in his cabinet. You think maybe you get a better shot at that now?
We had the Mayor in the cabinet, we have a bunch of senior ministers, and yet things don't seem to be moving on Ottawa's issues in the city of Ottawa. As far as transparency goes, it's just people just want to know that they can get access to information from government. They want to know that their voices are heard. You see these sweetheart deals that we spoke about with respect to energy generation contracts. The decisions that this government is making are just ad hoc.
Okay, but let me try this. I think most of the people in this room have seen all three of your parties in power. Right? You guys are in now, but you guys were in before that, you guys were in before that, Jeff.
I thought you were going to say we're in next.
Don't be too hasty.
That's for them to decide. And this is a refrain we've heard many times. We've heard that none of the three parties is as responsive or is as accountable or transparent as their electors would like them to be. Now, do they simply want too much information from you, or do you guys really have a problem here? Yes, sir.
Well, I think it's people's information. But I think we've also found a lot of the stuff, for example, Lisa was talking about, is publicly now available. It is available through freedom of information. It is available through the Integrity Commissioner. It is available through Auditor General. It is available through the Ombudsperson. You can go on and on and on, and it's almost like if you've got all that information, it's perhaps too much to access, to go through. So those who may be interested will do so. I think, again, I go back to my original point. The real issue here in terms of making people more engaged is to foster the participatory nature of democracy. You can put as much information out there as possible. If that information is not being used, or somebody says, yeah, it's there, I'm not going to use it, that's not going to still get rid of that sentiment.
Okay.
It's how do you engage them? How do you have a dialogue with them? Give you a very concrete example, coming back to technology. In the past, during a pre-budget consultation at this time of the year, the Minister of Finance always traveled through the major cities across the province and met about 60 or 70 people at each pre-budget consultation. Cost a lot of money, but you always just met that limited number of people. This year, the Minister of Finance is doing tally town halls because that technology is available. So far, he's been able to speak with 210,000 people across the province who've had an opportunity to give their point of view as to what should be in next year's budget. That's the kind of exercise we need to engage in more and more.
Okay. Lisa, do you think your party, as much as you claim to be more open and more transparent than in the past, are you still not where you need to be vis-a-vis what the people want?
Well, we put the bill forward. It was defeated. And, I don't buy the argument that Yasser just made that there's too much information out there so people don't need it or they don't want it. Quite frankly, I think that you have to give people the option if they want to open the doors of government and let the sun shine in to find out what's going on there. They should be perfectly allowed to do that, and that's why we put forward our bill. And just to Jeff's point about being from Eastern Ontario, time and time again, we have a disconnect at Queen's Park, and it has not improved with a hometown premier. We hear it daily, particularly in the suburban and rural parts of this great city.
Okay, David Hutton is the guy who put this on our agenda yesterday at Agenda Camp. You've heard what they've had to say. Maybe you want too much information from government. Maybe they're already being plenty transparent. Is that possible?
No, I think that's not true at all. What I heard was a lot of answers that had to do with polling and getting people's input, what they want. That's certainly part of it. Political parties will always do that. But I think what we're looking for is to respect the public's intelligence and demand for hard information around decision making.
Like what?
For example, what assumptions are being made? What are the budget calculations? What the expected outcomes are there? If we look at issues like the privatization we talked about, energy policy, those are all decisions where there are people in the public, not every citizen, but there are people in the public, if they're given the same information as being used behind closed doors to make these decisions, they can critique that information, they can make sense of it, and they can help the rest of us understand what's really going on.
But do you appreciate Yasser's argument, which is that this is a commercial contract, about which there is some proprietary information, and you can't know every single paragraph, comma, and et cetera, as part of the Samsung deal. Is that fair?
That's absolutely true, but I think that you could have a lot more transparency in the process leading up to the decision, and perhaps in the contract set out some requirements for transparency that are not normal. Once someone has a contract, then I think the need for commercial protection is much less. They have the signature on the paper. I think the terms of the contract and so on should be open, and the means that it was arrived at should be transparent. That's the key point.
Is it possible, though, David, in cabinet government, where decisions are made behind closed doors, in solidarity, maybe it's just not possible to get the citizens all of the information they want? Is that possible?
It's possible, but I don't think we're anywhere near that. I think, as you said yourself, we see successive governments, and I don't blame it purely on the politicians. I think there's a bureaucracy has a hand in this as well, that there's a reluctance to hand out information in case it's used against you, and so the public's often kept in the dark, and perhaps not enough respect for the intelligence of the public to absorb the information.
Okay, let me get Yasser on that. As open and as transparent as this government feels it is being, you've got, and I didn't ask you, are you a member of a political party?
I'm not.
You're not, okay. As open and transparent as you think you are being, you're still not meeting the bar that this gentleman and his colleagues in his group yesterday felt that was necessary. Are you hearing him?
I am hearing him, and my response will be, obviously, government needs to do more. I mean, where we are in transparency today in our governments at all levels, and where we used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there's a big journey that has taken place, and governments obviously needs to be more and more transparent, and that's why I continue to come back as to the role of an individual representative. After all, we are in a Westminster model of democracy where the individual representative has a lot of say, has a lot of voice, and that has to be always exercised and ensured that the information the constituents want gets to them, and the feedback they have or advice they have is followed through as well.
Jeff, how would the NDP be different?
How would the NDP be different?
Yep.
Well, the NDP wants to take a look at the whole system of government just in light of the new technology that's available. I agree with what Lisa was saying, that it's not a case of just too much information being out there. It's a question of getting access to the information before the decisions are made. People just feel that they're not being heard. They know there are other people in the room when these decisions are being made. It's not them. And we have the fallacy of Queen's Park right now of members of the legislature actually having to file an access to information request to see a government contract. There are Democratic representatives in that House. They should have access to that contract to let us know whether it's on the up and up, and yet the government won't let them see it.
Okay, let me do a little business with the folks at home here, because we want to remind everybody we're about halfway through the program, a little more than halfway, and we are in Ottawa tonight. On the first stop of our Agenda on the Road series, we're in Ottawa tonight, the hometown of the Premier of Ontario, Dalton McGuinty. Next month we go to Hamilton, the NDP leader Andrea Horwath's home turf, and then the month after that we're in Niagara Falls on the Niagara Peninsula, Tim Hudak's home turf for the Ontario PC Party leader for the Agenda on the Road. Later this year, Sudbury, we go up to Northern Ontario, and then one of the 905 ridings, a key battleground, all leading up to this October 2011 for the Ontario general election. I want to remind you that Mike Miner is up behind me. We're going to hear from him just a little bit later on. He's moderating a live chat at tvo.org/theagenda or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/theagenda. You can reach us via Twitter as well. You may have noticed during the course of the broadcast, your tweets have been coming up on the screen. Your Agenda, that's the hashtag, twitter.com #YourAgenda, and we'll get your comments up on the screen throughout the course of the broadcast. Okay, let's go to this one, actually also high on the list of voters' concerns yesterday, our Agenda campers, and this one has to do with civic engagement and electoral reform. Boy, you can tell this is an Ottawa audience, right? Look what they're interested in. Roll tape, please.
You can really ask the question, do we have a democracy? If less than 50% of people cast a vote, is this really democracy? In this plea, it's a plea for civic engagement and to counter voter apathy, to engage people at the time of election. And the question was put as broadly as possible, which is what measures or what opportunities would be taken to have some form of electoral reform to counter what we're seeing on the boards.
Okay, everybody bemoans low turnout at election time, and lots of people think that if we changed either the way we elect MPPs or some aspect of electoral reform, we'd see less voter apathy, more voter participation. Lisa, have you got any good ideas that you think would get more people jazzed up on politics and interested in our elections?
Yeah, you know, Yasser actually spoke to this in the previous segment. I think it does rely a lot on the individual member engaging with their city councillors. I know we have a couple of Ottawa city councillors here today, and that's great. It's also engaging with our federal members. Our ridings are the same boundaries, and I think that's quite important. There's use of new technology today, these teletown halls. We've all used them. You know, you can get onto Twitter, onto Facebook. Many of us are very accessible these days. Many of us have Blackberries, and during question period are actually tweeting back and forth with our constituents. So there is that level of accessibility that hasn't been there in the past. But I do believe the people of Ontario made a decision in the last election with the Citizens' Assembly in terms of any further electoral reform, and that was defeated. So I think the best bet for Ontario right now to focus on is our system that we currently have and opening up that to more citizens.
Jeff, it is a fact that there was a referendum in the last Ontario general election which went down in flames on whether to replace first past the post with some kind of proportional representation system that I know the NDP prefers. Is this issue, for all intents and purposes, despite the interest in our agenda camp yesterday, is this issue essentially dead?
No, it's not dead. If the people want electoral reform, they're going to get it. They just have to keep asking for it and asking for it and asking for it. And quite frankly, the referendum question last time was a bit confusing. There wasn't a very good education campaign put on the ground to explain to people what mixed member proportional representation was. It was quite a confusing exercise, and the voter participation in that referendum was abysmal. A lot of people simply didn't know about it. I don't think the government did a good job in telling people that this was going to be happening. But no, it's not dead. And this is issue number 3. People aren't satisfied with the kind of representation they have at Queen's Park. They want to know that if they show up and vote NDP for a provincial election, that there are going to be NDP members sitting there at Queen's Park representing them. They want to know that if they vote for any other party, that there's at least going to be a voice for them in that legislature at Queen's Park. But the other side of the question is, how do we engage all those people who just don't bother to show up on election day at all? They don't care. They think it doesn't matter. And that's where government has to start engaging people, but showing them that politics can make a difference.
We may have some ideas in the back of the hall right now. Yasser, I'll ask you just to stand down for a second, because I think Mike Miner is moderating an online chat on our homepage, tvo.org/theagenda, and we've been playing some of the comments, or at least posting them at any rate, Mike, on the big screens here at the National Gallery of Canada. And you've got some folks as well who want to opine in on this, so go ahead, take it away.
Absolutely. We've had people discussing right along with us throughout the broadcast, topic for topic, but one thing that's been coming up the whole way through has been voter reform. We've had Hanya talking to us via Facebook saying that we need to make voting more meaningful. I don't think that casting a ballot every few years should be the only contribution the majority of citizens have towards how our government runs. I'm not sure what form reforms would take, but more inputs into the system would be ideal. And they're talking about transparency. They want a more nimble and responsive government. They want technology to be used to be able to reach out. They want a really responsive government, and that's more important to them than specific issues in some cases. Although Thirsty Mind, who's tweeting in, said that responsiveness really just means doing things I agree with, and he may have a chance. He may have a point there. People are talking about preferential ballots. They're also talking about MMP. They feel that the referendum wasn't done properly, people weren't educated, the threshold wasn't right, and one person, Stephen Nicholl, says that 1 million votes are wasted in Ontario every election due to first past the post. And Chris Tyndall, who ran for the Green in Toronto, is tweeting in, and he said quite simply, MMP gives us the results we voted for, the current system does not. It's therefore more democratic.
Okay, Mike, thanks, and keep moderating away up there, and again, we'll put comments up on the screen throughout the course of the broadcast. Yasser, you hear this a lot. I'm sure you folks who are elected don't believe that whoever... What percentage of the votes did you get in the last election?
I got 35% of the vote.
35%. So my hunch is you don't think that the 65% of the people who didn't vote for you wasted their vote. You still feel you represent them anyway.
Absolutely.
But that thought is out there, that somehow if my vote doesn't somehow end up in a seat on the floor of the legislature, it's a wasted vote. What do you say to those people?
Well, this is a topic actually I spent a lot of time thinking about and doing research, given my personal family background, coming from a country originally where I was born, where there was no democracy as to. We've got this excellent system in place in Canada, but we see that people don't come out and vote. I mean, there's an opportunity for people to actually every 4 years to get their point of view across. Why is it? Is it apathy? Is it just lack of interest? Is it not knowing information? And one of the things I've come to a conclusion, Steve, is that people are interested. People are interested. People are interested in issues that matters to them the most. People live busy lives. So I'll give you an example. If there is a breast cancer run in Ottawa tomorrow, there will be 10,000 people there. Not only they will be there to participate, they will have raised money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to support the cause. That doesn't mean that people are not interested, but that is the cause they've chosen to be interested in because they had some direct relationship to that particular cause. So perhaps our democracy have to evolve in a way that we start going person by person to their individual needs and interests and try to tailor to them. And that's where I agree with Lisa. I think technology has a great role to play in making sure that people's specific needs and desires and wants are being being addressed in some fashion.
Let me put our fourth issue on the table then for discussion this evening, and to help me do that is Julie Lalonde. You were at yesterday's agenda camp, and you were talking yesterday, Julie. It was I must say, it was a wonderful question, but it was a very long question, Julie. So I'm going to cut to the chase here. You wanted to get our representatives at Queen's Park rectifying the lack of access to governance, accountability with human services. You saw a real dearth of social services, or a real need for more social services. And I wonder if you could sort of just add to that a little bit, if you would. Where do you see the need most desperately?
Well, I think our biggest problem is that social services is seen as a soft issue, but it is an election issue. Yesterday it was the top 3 that people voted for, because a lot of people were not aware, for example, that children's aid societies there's no oversight by the Ombudsman, there's no oversight by the government. 85% of people in childcare in an unregulated, unlicensed childcare facility. We have serious housing issues. Violence against women continues to be an issue. And by treating social services as this soft issue that we'll get to after the economy is ignoring the fact that people can't go to work if they don't have a place to live, if they live in a home where there's violence, if they don't have access to childcare. And so this is a serious issue that we want to see as a forefront and not so much this afterthought. And we need to stop talking about rhetoric of we care about families. Well, why do we care? How would we care about families if we have children in children's aid where there's no regulation? That's a problem.
Can I ask you this, Julie? I don't mean this to sound like a cynical question, but the reality is most homeless people don't vote. Most taxpayers, many more taxpayers, of course, do.
Yeah.
Do you think these issues don't get the attention they deserve? Because frankly, there's just not that many votes there.
Well, I find that ironic considering we're wondering why people are not voting, and then we're also dismissing the fact that people who are homeless don't vote, for example. So if people who are homeless, if people who are dealing with the day-to-day life of trying to access a women's shelter, trying to get a decent job, trying to find childcare, they don't have the time to engage in this discussion around the economy, or do we go with green energy, or do we go with something else, when they're so busy with their day-to-day lives. And I think that should be a priority for people.
And like I asked everybody else, do you belong to a political party?
Absolutely not.
You said that with a certain pride that I think would distress them up here.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Lisa, why don't you tackle this first? The suggestion here is that everybody nowadays is so focused on jobs and the economy that there are other equally important issues that are being left to the wayside. What do you say?
Well, I appreciate Julie's question. I used to be the Children and Youth Services critic for my party and put forward the Children's Bill of Safety and Protective Rights, which would have provided oversight by the Ombudsman to children's aid societies. Unfortunately, it didn't move forward, but it was a very big piece of legislation. It was very comprehensive, and it was a great starting point. But the reality is, the protection of our children in our society should be probably first and foremost beyond anything else, and I say this as a mother. One of the things that frustrates me, for example, and Yasser and myself are both MPPs, so we do get phone calls daily from people. One of the biggest case files that we get are from the Family Responsibility Office. In the last 7 years, program spending in this province has gone up by 70%. Unfortunately, the people of this province don't feel that way. You clearly don't, because you had to bring this question up. So, I mean, it goes back to the sort of the same old question: do we feel that we're better off today than we were, 4 years ago? And that question keeps coming up. Those calls from the people who require the Family Responsibility Office haven't decreased in the last few years.
Lisa, let me jump in here, though. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Nobody in the world, almost nobody in the world, certainly most people watching this, we've just been through the Great Recession. Nobody feels better off today than they were 4 years ago.
Well, then we can ask people the alternate question is, do you feel that this extra 70% in government spending in the last few years has impacted your life?
Okay, that's a fair question.
And I guess
yes,
that's the
what
question
about
people
that?
don't answer.
For 70% additional spending, are we 70% better off?
Well, let's ask the question, where is the 70% additional spending has gone in? Do you think that spending has gone in hiring more nurses, 10,000 more nurses? Do you think we have too many nurses in our hospitals? That 70% extra funding has gone in hiring more teachers. Do you think that there are more teachers in the system? Of course not. The system went through, when it comes to social services, under the previous government, under the previous Harris government, went through a massive assault. A huge assault. And the challenge has been in the last 7 years to rebuild that system when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to Ontario Direct Supports Program or childcare services. And that's where a lot of the investment has gone on in the last 7 years. Are we, in a perfect situation? Absolutely not. There more needs to be done, but there was a lot of catching up had to be done, and that's why the largest 3 program areas Where your taxpayers' dollars get invested is healthcare, education, and social and community services.
Jeff, your view on this?
Unfortunately, all the extra spending that's been going on, you said you feel that it's not hitting the ground where people need the services, and the sad thing is because that's just not the priority of government these days. It's not delivering those services to people. It's as if the role of government has shifted to facilitating, to helping other people provide services to people. Like rather than helping more seniors get into a nursing home and get the care they need, the priority seems to be helping people build nursing homes and helping people manage nursing homes and provide the finances to create a business of running nursing homes than actually providing the care to the seniors who need it. Okay. And maybe that's a fundamental shift that needs to happen with government. Like I said at the beginning, the priority has to go back to government that makes your life better and government that's focused on providing the services that people need so they can be productive and equal.
Let me get one concluding comment in this segment from Julie on this. I mean, any of what you've heard here give you any added insight?
Not really, in the sense that I think I agree that you're right, that we can dump a lot of money, but people on the ground, I'm a frontline worker and I work in policy, and I'm not seeing results on the ground.
You're a frontline worker where?
With sexual assault survivors, and I advocate for violence against women. And for example, the fact that women are not a special interest. We are 51% of the population, so it's insulting to be referred to as this sort of special interest group when we're not.
You don't think you're the services?
I think I'm special, but I don't think I'm part of the special interest group.
The services you and your organization provide, you don't feel you're any better able to provide those services today than you were?
Absolutely not.
7 years ago.
In no way, shape, or form. No, and I think people have this idea that things go as a snowball effect, right? So once you have that right, you don't lose it, but you do. We have lost them. And to say that, we're in hard economic times, so we can't give money to violence against women, that's absurd. People still experience violence and homelessness, even more so during hard economic times, so we need to be a priority.
Julie, thank you for your contribution on this. Just hang on to that mic for me, if you will, as well, because we've got a few minutes left here, and I want to tackle one more issue, and that is healthcare. I guess surprisingly enough, most of the public opinion surveys you see say jobs in the economy and healthcare are number 1 and 2 of the biggest issues. And they actually weren't with our agenda campers yesterday. Jobs in the economy was well down the list. Healthcare, as you can see, we're getting to it with, 12 minutes to go in the program. It was also around number 5. But the question that was asked was, how would you support a shift from a reactive healthcare system to a preventive overall wellness approach? I guess trying to transform healthcare from just simply treating sickness to preventing illness in the first place. Everybody says we got to do it. It seems that most people don't think we're doing it quickly enough. Jeff, why don't you start on this one? How are we doing?
In terms of the shift to just overall wellness, we're not doing so well. Healthcare is a big budget item, as Yasser mentioned. Government tends to get very preoccupied with the administration of hospitals, the hiring of nurses, and a little bit too preoccupied with the payment of certain hospital CEOs lately. But keeping people out of the hospital is a healthcare savings. Providing people with healthcare services at home and in the community and out of the emergency room is also a better way of delivering healthcare services. We need to make that shift, and there's been a lot of work going on within the healthcare community to look at ways of doing this.
Yes, are we moving quickly enough in this way?
We have to do more, and I think a lot has been done. If you just look at, for example, community health centers, they've doubled in number in the province in last 7 years. Having community health services being provided by nurse-led practitioners, for example, because that's a very holistic way of providing healthcare, not just worrying about primary care. Those are the kind of things where the McGuinty government has been making the investments to ensure that there are opportunities for people, not to just, go to what's called the after-the-fact medicine once you get sick, is how to keep them outside the hospitals. And we've seen a significant increase in our healthcare spending, and significant dollars are being invested in that particular area to ensure that we're eating healthier, that we have access to all kinds of services that were not available before.
Okay, let me go to Lisa. I mean, you know that healthcare makes up whatever it is, 47% of the Ontario budget. You know they've spent more, today than they were 4 years ago or 7 years ago. When the Conservatives were in previously, healthcare spending went up a lot. They tell us it's going to be 80% of the budget in a couple of decades if we don't get a handle on it. Are we making the transition properly?
I mean, that's a tough one. This issue of health promotion has been, around a long time, and I think governments have talked about it, even at the national level, for quite some time. And I think we are making inroads. Is it enough? No, it's not. And you look at it from the cradle to grave issues. I have a 6-year-old, so I've spent my 10 hours in an emergency room, hospital for the ear infection or the fever. And then you look at,
you really waited 10 hours for
I've
treatment?
waited 10 hours twice, both at Sick Kids and here locally at one of our hospitals.
Why do you think you had to wait that long?
There's such a bottleneck, and we have other issues as well. We have people that are actually in the emergency rooms that should be maybe in a hospital bed, in a permanent bed, and there's people in hospital beds that are permanent beds that should be in a long-term care facility. And the whole backlog in the system. And as a parent, I see this every day. Consistently, we hear in our communities the challenges placed on elderly couples or people with elderly parents, trying to get them into a long-term care facility. So you know what, we have to look at this holistically, this whole issue of health promotion, but we also have to understand that there are people that actually need to be in a hospital, and we have to make sure that the investments are there.
We do. I mean, she's right insofar as she says we've been talking about this for 25 years. And this transition is something...
has been alive.
What's that?
It's as long as Yasser's been alive.
As long as Yasser's been alive.
Yeah, somebody who's younger than me.
Actually, which one of you two is younger? You're younger than him. What are you, 35? You're
38.
You're 38, and you're?
36.
36. And you were the youngest one ever elected, weren't you, when you got elected?
No.
Youngest Conservative female ever elected in Ontario history.
Yeah, federally or provincially, but who's
Federally
counting?
and provincially, okay. That's what I thought. But we've been talking about this since, Lisa MacLeod was 10 years old. So...
and you were 12.
And you were 12. Why don't we seem to be making enough progress?
I think it's again, it comes to us as individuals. This is one of those changes that no government can force you into it. You can create incentives, but in the end of the day, it's something we need to look after ourselves. We need to make sure that we change our lifestyle. We need to make sure that we start eating healthy foods. We need to make sure that we exercise. Those kind of things, I don't think a government can micromanage. It can create incentives. What we have seen under the McGuinty government for the very first time, that there is a Ministry of Health Promotion, and their aim or mandate is to ensure that that there's, for the first time ever, we have a Smokes-Free Ontario legislation to prevent or cessation of smoking, or better eating, and more exercise. But again, I think it's up to us individually to make those life changes.
Okay, Yasser, that's going to be the last word on this discussion this evening, but stand by, everybody. We're not quite done yet, because while we have taken the agenda to Ottawa for our Agenda on the Road series, my colleague, Cheryl Jackson, has been doing the same for her program on tvoparents.com. Cheryl, the mic is yours. Tell us what you've been up to the last couple of days.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Well, we came here to Ottawa to find out why Ottawa schools are doing so poorly. When you take a look at EQAO scores and compare schools in the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board with similar schools socioeconomically across the province, the Ottawa schools ended up in the bottom 5 of all school boards across Ontario. So the question was why? It turns out one of the reasons is French immersion, which, as you could imagine, is extremely popular here in Ottawa. And parents feel a lot of pressure to put their kids in French immersion. The problem is, traditionally that program hasn't been very kind to kids who have special needs or different learning styles, or maybe struggle a little bit in school. So we invited 4 people in to come and talk to us about this issue, tell us about the problem, and most importantly, what's being done to fix it. So we'll post that in just a few days, and you'll be able to find the discussion online at tvoparents.com.
That's great. Cheryl, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it, and it's good to work with you again, as always. Can I thank our guests for coming from, I usually say near and far, but actually from near and near this evening. This is your hometown, and we're very grateful for your hospitality. We've had a wonderful time here in Ottawa, from left to right, both politically and geographically. Jeff Atkinson from the New Democrats, and Yasser Naqvi, the Liberal MPP for Ottawa Centre, Lisa MacLeod, the PC MPP for Nepean Carleton. I guess it's probably silly asking you three who's going to win the next Ontario election, given that it's not till October. And I have a hunch I know how you're all going to respond, so I won't bother. But I will say thank you all very much for being here this evening and getting our Agenda on the Road series started.